The capital is set to miss out on £7 billion of spending this year. That's according to the Centre for Economic and Business Research, which says London is being hit hard by the lack of foreign tourists and fewer Brits than normal wanting to spend their holidays in the city. And it's not just holidaymakers who aren't coming to the capital. This morning, the Business Secretary said while he would like to see civil servants returning to the office 3 days a week, flexible home working is here to stay. So what does all of this mean for London's future? Our political correspondent Simon Harris has been finding out.
On a damp Monday morning, one of London's sightseeing buses boasted that rarest of species, the lesser spotted American tourist. Laura and Audrey from Utah have taken advantage of relaxed COVID rules for visitors from the US.
We've come for pleasure to get out of our country and spread our wings a little that COVID's lifting up a bit.
But most on board were staycationers.
We're from Bournemouth and we used to live fairly close to London, so we thought we'd bring the children and the family here for a day out to see the sights.
We're from just outside Blackpool. We've come down from my brother's wedding and then having a few days extra.
Before COVID, as many as 8 out of 10 passengers on these buses were from overseas.
And we operate in 23 cities across the world, and in Paris, in Italy, in Berlin. We're seeing 40% of our customers already from the US, and in the UK, we've had maybe 1 or 2 in the last week.
At the 5-star Landmark Hotel in Marylebone, Mark and Francesca have just got married, but Mark's South African parents had to quarantine en route in Montenegro.
They had to do 10 days in Montenegro, and then they had to have their 2 or 3 COVID tests there, then they flew into London, they had to quarantine, do the 5-day test and release, So they spent thousands of pounds on PCR tests. I think they've had like 6 or 7 PCR tests.
Travel restrictions have left a big dent in luxury hotel bookings.
We've missed the Middle East business, and certainly for a lot of the luxury hotels in London and luxury retail stores, they very much rely on that Middle East business, and that has not been forthcoming.
Foreign tourists used to make up around 2/3 of summer visitors to the Tower of London.
At the moment we're getting nearly 4,000 visitors a day. It's the summer holidays, so it's the peak for this year. On a normal summer's day, we would have had over 10,000 people.
Last year, the pandemic cost the Tower and the other historic royal palaces £100 million. The tourist drought isn't the only big challenge facing London's economy. Working from home continues to have a huge impact on many businesses, which is one reason why ministers want London's 100,000 civil servants to start going back to the office.
The small businesses, especially your cafes and lunch venues, they rely so much on that commuter traffic, going past their cafe in the morning, stopping in for a coffee and a bite to eat.
Outside Buckingham Palace, there was a sprinkling of tourists, but nowhere near the normal crowd. London desperately needs its visitors and its commuters. Simon Harris, ITV News, Buckingham Palace.
A Croydon firefighter has spoken of the danger and punishing conditions she faces helping to tackle Greek wildfires. Tracy Doyle is one of 4 London firefighters sent to Greece as part of an international search and rescue team. She says her and her colleagues have watched as fires jumped across roads without warning. Our correspondent Simon Harris has more.
For days, Greek firefighters have been trying to hold the line in a battle with nature. The raging wildfires have devastated communities. The operation to halt the flames has become an international effort, and among the 21 British firefighters are 4 from London.
The conditions here in Greece are punishing. With the heat, it gets hotter and hotter throughout the day, the humidity. We're struggling to find shade at times because it's literally the heat is so intense when you're working. You have to remember to actually replenish your salts, your food, water intake, because, you can literally fatigue at a moment's notice.
Tracy and her colleagues are in an area of Greece called Arcadia. They're trying to create fire breaks, and they have to constantly be on their guard.
You're listening to wind change, you're seeing the difference in the trees, you'll hear the birds will stop singing, all the wildlife just completely disappears, and before you know it, there's a fire straight in front of you. We've actually seen fires jump from one side of the road to the other, and literally without a moment's notice. So we're also being very mindful and aware of the actual wind conditions. It's very hot here, it's very dry, and the humidity is quite intense. So, we have spotters everywhere looking for smoke.
The London firefighters are part of an international search and rescue team based at Croydon Fire Station. They're on standby 24 hours a day to fly to disaster zones like earthquakes and tsunamis. And on this mission, they're being helped by a colleague who, thanks to the pandemic, is working from home in Greece.
His name's Apollo. He's a part-time firefighter out in Athens, and we've managed to link the team with him so that we've got, a familiar face, a local face as well that can help us with resourcing, translation, etc. whilst they're out there. So that's fantastic.
The Greek wildfires are unlike anything the London firefighters have faced.
It's completely different from where I'm based in Croydon to come out here to Greece. Humidity, heat, unpredictability with the fires, wind, it's completely different.
If they're needed, the Londoners will be in Greece for at least another week. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Next tonight, the British swimming team had its most successful games in Tokyo for more than 100 years. For many of the competitors, the Crystal Palace National Sports Centre was an important venue at some point in their careers. No surprise then, athletes and locals are furious it's been closed since March last year, waiting for repairs. More than 30,000 people have now signed a petition calling for its reopening. Simon Harris has been inside to find out what's taking so long.
The Crystal Palace pools are in a sorry state. They haven't seen a swimmer or diver since March 2020. Just days before the first lockdown, they were drained because of a leak. A crack was discovered in an underwater window, and it's going to cost almost £1.3 million to put right. Eden Cheng from Streatham came 7th in the women's 10-metre synchro in Tokyo. Crystal Palace is where she began diving.
I was into gymnastics. That was the sport that I wanted and I loved to do. So without this pool and without the club, I wouldn't be standing here.
Eden joined a club set up by Jill Snowd and her Olympic diver husband Chris.
The Olympics have made children seeing the Olympic Games want to take up the sport, asking their mums and dads, please can I go diving? So they're contacting us. I'm trying my best to accommodate them, but we don't have a diving pool.
It's another sad chapter in the recent history of this site. Long before the Olympic Park was even a dream, Crystal Palace was the jewel in the crown of London's sporting facilities. A world-class centre of excellence, not just for swimming and diving, but also athletics.
The National Sports Centre at Crystal Palace cost £2.75 million, but it should be worth every penny.
Crystal Palace opened in 1964. Alongside the pools was an athletics track which would host international competitions. But the years haven't been kind and there's now an air of decay.
Rats on the indoor track, trees growing out of the stadium, and now you've got dry swimming pools.
Why should money be spent on facilities here when there are first-class facilities in the Olympic Park?
Well, not everybody can make the Olympic Park, quite simply. It's a matter of geography.
You think about our Olympic success and we're so proud of that, but we need somewhere where people can come and train so that we're creating the next generation of swimmers. And actually, if we lose a facility in South East London, we're never going to get it back again.
More than 30,000 people have signed a petition calling for the pool to reopen. It's a decision for Sadiq Khan, and today he was optimistic.
I'm hoping over the course of the next few weeks to give an open date. It's been delayed, of course, by the pandemic, which slowed down some of the work. Clearly, we can't reopen the pool in the centre if there's any concerns around safety.
Crystal Palace is one of 5 pools in London, closed since the pandemic and now facing uncertain futures. It's not a good look for a city with ambitions to host another Olympics. Simon Harris, ITV News, Crystal Palace.
Good evening. Tributes have been paid to a father who was stabbed to death after confronting a group of teenagers. James Markham was killed on Monday evening outside his home in Chingford. One line of inquiry is the 45-year-old was trying to protect his daughter. 2 14-year-olds have been arrested in connection with his murder, and police are tonight urging parents to turn their children in if they think they were involved. Our correspondent Simon Harris has more.
Jamie Markham died just yards from his back door. He was stabbed to death after confronting a group of youths who were threatening his 17-year-old daughter. Yet another senseless killing on the streets of London. For a father to be murdered simply for trying to protect a child is disturbing enough, but so too is the age of his alleged attackers. 2 14-year-old boys have been arrested, and the police think other children were also involved.
It's just scary because I've got grandchildren and they're at the age where they're going to want to start going out. It's just unbelievable, really.
Hairdressers Georgia and Pinky work in a salon across the road.
It is scary, obviously, if you're talking about a very young community hanging around with knives. It makes us feel, on edge.
And for our clients as well, it's not nice that kids are always hanging around. So yeah, it's really frightening.
In a local cafe, I spoke on Zoom to Chingford's MP, who was appalled.
The idea that a 14-year-old could possibly have murdered this father just doing nothing else but protecting his daughter should send absolute shockwaves through the system. This has to stop. We need policing on the street, visible to everybody.
There have been 82 murders in London this year. More than 2/3, 57, involved a knife, and 23 of the victims were teenagers. Closer analysis of the capital's crime statistics reveals a worrying trend, and the police are all too aware of it.
There's an ever greater concentration of younger people, teenagers, who are carrying knives, and all too often you will see a phenomenon where there's 3 or 4 on one side having a fight with 3 or 4 on the other side, and they're carrying knives. So there's a huge amount for all of us in our city to do about that. It's a horrible phenomenon. I regret it.
Throughout the day, friends of the Markham family left flowers and messages outside the flat. This one read, "So sad, gone too soon." One of the 14-year-olds arrested was being held on suspicion of murder, the other on suspicion of plotting to murder. And tonight, the police appealed to parents who know their children were involved to turn them in. Simon Harris, ITV News, Chingford.